Hello and welcome back to episode 3 of New Earth Conversations, Vilcabamba Style. Glad to be with you. Thanks for tuning in. As always, this is going to be a bit of a free-flowing, wide-ranging conversation today. We're going to get into a little bit of childhood trauma and inner child work. Very upbeat topic, as Choco pointed out a few minutes ago.
But real.
And how that connects into life path and destiny and powers and a lot of stuff surrounding that, as well as some of the reactions perhaps that we've gotten from this podcast so far in the community and otherwise, and sort of what that means on the big picture, deeper sort of way, and how we can put some context to that, and probably a few other things. So again, thanks for tuning in. We appreciate again you guys' support. So thank you for watching these episodes, for commenting, for liking the videos, and for any sharing that you can do as well. We really appreciate it. Again, for us, we want to share this stuff both to kind of highlight that these kinds of there is a community where this kind of stuff is going on, and these kinds of conversations are happening, and action, I would argue, as well. And also to hopefully provide some value to people who are tuning in, to be able to see that other people are having these same experiences and are sharing these kinds of conversations. So again, thanks for tuning in. Okay, so
Can I add one thing
please,
before we get started?
please.
I'm super excited about the comments that have been coming in on the YouTube videos in particular. So if you've seen previous videos and you've commented, you will see that I have commented back to you, because I kind of went on this like binge commenting spree for it took over an hour to just go back and actually read and to take a moment and like kind of absorb what people were saying. And it was touching, and it was funny, and it was meaningful. And there were one or two people who had like contrary opinions, which we actually welcome. And it's like about an open forum for dialogue. And if you don't agree with something, like there's always like a kind way. It's like lead with kindness and then state your different opinion. So I even commented back, and some of the comments were like, no, I don't think it's that, or whatever. So we do appreciate the comments, and it's making me realize like this builds community on an international level. There's some guy in Thailand who is obsessed with our videos and is so glad that he's very much retirement age, it looks like. He's just so glad that he gets to be part of these conversations. And he said, it feels like I'm sitting there in the living room with you and having coffee, and this is awesome. So we do appreciate you guys. So keep the comments coming. Okay, that was my thing.
It's been a great motivation for me as well to continue doing this. Sometimes I haven't feel like so safe to do this. I'm like, oh, I am not made for this, but I really love the feedback from the other people. Thank you so much for making me be here today.
And it's true. You mean like 10 minutes before we started, you're saying like, I don't know about this, because there is a really big vulnerability that all three of us are having. And that's, I don't mean to steal the mic here, but just saying, for the childhood trauma thing, I was like, okay, guys, let's the three of us, like, we've all talked to each other about a lot of deep stuff. Are we willing to put this on YouTube? Because at some point it gets a little like flat when we just keep referencing childhood trauma and this like kind of like broader picture concept, and not being personal about what it is. And we're sharing our personal journeys. So yeah, it's a boost of confidence to see your guys' comments.
Thank you.
No, absolutely. Thank you guys for sharing that as well. So getting into maybe starting kind of in some of the broader places of this experience and how trauma fits into that. So I think to have that conversation well, you kind of have to start with, like, what are we doing here, and what is the goal of life? Like, what's the goal of this lifetime, or of life in general? Which, it's interesting, right? You turned me on to Ram Dass recently, and I've been listening to him. And all of those sorts of not genres, not modalities, but like, not philosophies, there's a better word than all of those, but all of those sorts of spiritual philosophies, they tend to focus around, or at least large pieces of them focus around being present and becoming the observer, right? And so if that's a piece of the goal, um, towards whatever you're trying to achieve, if that's enlightenment or whatever, whatever it is that you're in, heaven, or whatever you're trying to achieve. um if that's the goal, well, then how do you get there? And I think that's really where the trauma conversation comes in a deep way, because I think that our triggers are trauma, right? It's quite literally, like, when we're triggered, it's literally our trauma, our wounds being touched, being triggered. And it's very difficult to be the observer and to stay present and to, have that sort of bird's eye view, and that sort of kind of floating through, taking what comes, being present, not putting judgment in there, all of those kinds of things. If you're being triggered all the time, by traumas, by unresolved traumas. And I think, as I've just explored this topic much more than I would have liked to or ever expected to in my life.
You didn't know you signed up for this?
No, there's a lot of things I didn't know I signed up for, but apparently I did. As I've explored it, it's become very apparent to me that resolving those traumas and those wounds is really the key, to peace, to health, to being able to have the sort of control, maybe that's not the right word, but sort of the mastery over your mind and over your thoughts that we'd all like to have, which has led into some wild stuff that, again, I did not think I needed or would ever get into, but I've discovered that I do, and I did, and it's an ongoing process. But I'll leave it there for now.
Wait, what are we supposed to say after that? Where are we going? Where are we going from here?
So what I have to say is, like, well, it took, for example, a lot of therapy for me in order to learn all about trauma. What is trauma? Like, how, like, me before, how can I understand that when I was a child, like, this affect me and, like, it's causing, like, my life now? Like, I had zero awareness of that. So being exposed to a lot of therapy, trying to heal a lot of wounds, like the pressure of, like, healing, it was there. So I had no other option to, like, face it and learn this from me. So yeah, no, I think from there I got the experience that now I can work with that. So for every time, like, I get triggered or something is, like, bother me, like, all right, I take the techniques that the therapist took with me. I'm like, all right, let's go and let's feel what you feel, where this comes from, and I'll do my own work, trying to heal, and, like, how can I do things better? Because honestly, there is not much that you can do of what has passed. All you can do in order to change the pattern of your trauma is, like, make a choice for future situations. Okay, if this is gonna happen again, I'm just gonna act different in base of the work that you've done. Like, for example, for me, it's like, all right, I'm gonna go and feel what is going on with me, and, like, breathe it in and breathe it out. Okay, and, like, ask myself questions, and that's the way I find out, oh, this comes when I was a kid, and my mom was not letting me sleep at night, or my mom was putting a lot of pressure for me to do stuff. Oh, this is actually not my partner that is pressure me. It's, like, the pressure that I put on myself in order to accomplish. And, like, yeah, so for example, the only way I learned this is from therapy. So my recommendation for every single person in the world, I think, go to therapy. Everyone has to go to therapy. There is no way you're here without childhood trauma.
Are we taking notes? I have a question. Can you describe what kind of therapy it was? Because there's so many different therapies out there, and some people could say, like, I don't even know where to, like, what is therapy, and, like, how do I find the right therapist? And, like, your story is just particular to you. It won't apply to everybody. But if you weren't familiar with therapy before, like, what made you actually take action to do that? And who did you find, and what kind was it?
All right, so it was very interesting. Obviously, those things happen kind of like, oh, this is for me. So, for example, I was just around before my awakening.
About a year ago or so?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I was going to drop like my computer to the guy that fixes, and he lives with a therapist. And when I was in the door, I see the sign, which was a very a special sign, like sacred, the sign of her logo, and it was talking about therapy with, in this case, psilocybin. So
Psilocybin.
psilocybin.
Uh-huh.
So I was like, wow, interesting. I'm like, is this was calling me.
Oh,
So that
interesting.
started there. So I started doing therapy with her, and I did not start with the psilocybin. I first,
Psilocybin.
like, we study, and like I was like, and I do have the trust on this. This is medicine. This is something that is used to open up the wounds, and so I already had that knowledge. So that was very interesting to me, and like I got into that. And after that, like, because I opened that door, or that door was there for me, other person comes out in my on my way too. So they just, you're open and they just start coming. So it was very beautiful. My second therapist was about um, generational trauma, and how you heal by writing, escritura, introspective writing. So yeah, I did amazing work with her as well. So no, I believe that I am not done with that. I'm gonna continue doing this work, but for now I have enough work to do for certain time. So when I feel like, okay, I think I'm done with this, and when I feel a little confused about other stuff because I don't know what's gonna come, but I'm gonna keep doing it when the right time comes. So yeah. I lose my thought about that.
It's amazing. I remember because we were friends at the time when you either started seeing the first or 2nd therapist, and you were really dedicated to it. I remember we were talking about plans that we are going to do, and you're like, no, I think it's horseback riding. You're like, I can't do it because every Tuesday I'm seeing the therapist. And I thought, I'm super happy for you that you made that kind of commitment. And a lot of people, and it's all good, wherever anyone is on their journey, it's all good. It's really hard to make the commitment. And sometimes people try out a therapist. And for me, I went through a couple different therapists. Like they were like bad dates. They were like bad dates. I met the person once. I'm like, this is terrible. Like I'm actually getting like a bad vibe from this person. I actually feel like I'm being judged right now. What is happening? And so you have to stick to it and to find the right person and then make the commitment to keep going.
Yeah, being able to share,
Yeah,
to trust that this person is gonna guide you.
They're like a Sherpa, and they're not. I just had this conversation with someone, and I was interviewing another health practitioner for the retreat that we're having. Speaking about how any healer, any therapist, and even doctor, it's like they're not fixing you; they're helping guide you to your own healing. Yeah. And I really feel that with a good therapist, they don't actually tell you what to do. You know, they're not saying like, yes, definitely get the divorce. No, stay because the kids are there. Like no. They shouldn't be. Flash news. Do not let a therapist tell you that kind of thing. But they have ways of pulling at strings inside of your heart that maybe reveal something that you had so locked up you couldn't hear in your own subconscious.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'll share a little bit about my therapy. There was one other thing I was going to say I did, but I forget. Maybe it'll come back to me. Yeah. But I think for me personally, if it's the childhood trauma, lead topic here, and therapy in general. So there's been a few different things that I've done with my childhood trauma journey and just unpacking what does that mean? Like what does that mean to me, and how is it affecting me today, and what might I be able to do so it doesn't have a negative influence or as much of a negative influence on me. And therapy was one of them, but also working with all different other kinds of modalities, from my yoga practice, my deep meditation practice, to doing plant medicine journey. Oh, that was the other question I was going to ask you, but I'll get that in a second. There's been different things, and I don't think there's any one set formula of like the right order to do things in. I think in your life, depending where you are, the way you literally were seeing signs on a wall for like the therapist that attracted you, that was the right thing for you in that moment. For me, my childhood trauma unwinding, of even understanding that I had childhood trauma, if anyone can relate to that, I was a 30-year-old adult. I'm like, I'm good. Like, I'm totally good. I'm successful. I'm married. I have a great career. I have tons of friends, and, income was good because I worked really hard. I'm like, I'm fine. Life is good, until you realize that it's not. When you start to have a spiritual awakening or some sort of conscious connection, and you start to realize that you have crazy triggers like you said, that don't have to do with that situation or the person right in front of you. It's tied to something else that I can't understand. It's like a treasure map where I don't understand how it connects, and be able to go back to like, what's the source, the root cause of these like really bad reactions that I was having, you know, lashing out in anger, getting defensive, etc. Where's that cause coming from? And for me, because my first therapist I ever saw was after my first divorce. I was 33 years old, 32, 33. It was in New York City. That's where I lived. And it was pre like Zoom and Skype days in like 2012, 13. And so it's like you had to go sit on a person's couch in their office. Like it was very traditional, like New York therapist. And once I went on a bunch of bad dates, quote unquote, bad first interview sessions or trial sessions with 3 of them, the 4th one, it was amazing. I felt like I found a second like mother, but also like a wise teacher. You know, she was significantly older than me. She just held this very sensitive, compassionate wisdom, was so loving, but also a little no nonsense. Like she wasn't letting, she was calling me out on my shit, you know, and I was making stories up about this and that, and he did this and the boss did that. You know, she would have this skillful way of bringing it back. I wasn't ready for a shaman at that point in my life. I didn't even know what shamans were. There was something you saw in like National Geographic videos. Like I that was not my exposure. I was very much in the yoga path. I see some puppies that are barreling down at us right now. You guys might get a friendly hello. Oh boy. And so for me, I'm so grateful that I had the tenacity to go through a couple really bad trial and errors with therapists that were not the right fit for me, find the right New York one who wasn't covered by my insurance, pay through the nose for it, and be committed for like over a year. And taking breaks for my personal journey, absolutely. I just know when that chapter's kind of closed. It's been enough. Like I've gotten so much from this person, and then you have to work on it. And that's one of the things you said, I totally agree. We can't stay in therapy for 20 years straight. I mean, maybe some people, I'm not saying you can't, but I think at some point you immerse into real life and you use all these tools that people have shared with you or trained you. You use your meditation practice, and you got to support yourself. And it's not about people constantly going back to like either the psilocybin or the ayahuasca, the plant medicine, the shaman, or the traditional Western therapist. At some point, we got to play with life and see how that goes, and then dip back in. So I've had 3 different traditional therapists over 10 years spread out. And the most recent one was exactly 1 year ago. It was last July, August, and September. I worked with this woman. I'll save that for later in this podcast, but she was excellent. Okay, here's the teaser. She was having things come out of me. I swear. I said, oh my God, I'm so over that already. Like I already talked about this with my mom when I was 7, with my first therapist 10 years ago. Why is this coming up? And it's not because the first therapist did a bad job or I didn't really get to it. It's because I got to it as deep as I could in the place that I was in my life at 33 years old. I'm now 43 years old. I can go layers deeper. I was like, shit, more layers. Why? And it was painful, and it was hard, and it was also exhilarating. Like there's a high I get from like self-development work, kind of like how deep can I go? And if you find a skillful person that can hold you, man, we can go really deep. And I applaud anyone who goes the path that is not the easy journey to take.
Yeah, I mean, I would make the argument that if you're capable of getting angry, you have traumas, which is every human on earth, right? Like
Interesting.
There's not, because that's what shapes your reactions, right? Like they talk about in a lot of the philosophies, like who is it that's offended, right? Or who is it that's upset, or what is it? You know, what is being wronged? Like who are you being wronged, or like what does that even mean? And it's like, I think the way that works is we spend the first chunk of our life thinking everything is external. So it's like, you know, yeah, you don't know anything's wrong with you at all. You think you're normal, which you are, right? You are, like, you're a normal human on earth, doing what most humans do. Thinking that everything is external, and when you're upset or frustrated or depressed or you know, whatever those things are that you're feeling that are not what you want to be feeling, or creating experiences that aren't enjoyable, whatever, your mind will find all of the justifications and all of the reasons to say, well, this is happening because I'm feeling this way because, right? And those will all be external things. That'll be, the wife or the husband or the boyfriend or the girlfriend or the financial situation or the job or the circumstance or the cop that towed your car, whatever, right? Whatever those things are. But I think actually in truth, those are you thinking that things, taking something personally, like thinking that you are having something happen to you, not understanding that that doesn't exist. And then it's really the thing psychologically that's triggering that. Are you associating it with things in your life that happened previously that you think caused you to feel X, Y, or Z, which are traumas? So like when you finally realize, if you realize, which I think a lot of people die never realizing this too, right? But like if you realize, oh, it's not external, right? In general, this experience is not external, it's internal, it's me sort of discovering myself or exploring myself. Then you can start to look at some of that stuff, and you can start to dive into, I mean, I've done some wild things. Like, I mean, I remember hearing about these things years ago and probably making fun of them and like thinking they're absurd, but I've actually seen it. Like, I've seen me as a certain age inside myself as an actual entity stuck there and like talked to them more than once, like many times, right? Like seeing the 4-year-old or the 14-year-old or the 8-year-old, those are actually pretty much the ones in my case, who's literally, it's a piece of your psyche that's actually stuck in time. I don't know if it's even in time, but it is kind of in time, actually. It's stuck in time that you need to bring back to yourself, right? You need if you want to not have those triggers, and if you want to be able to be sort of in charge of your experience, at least mentally, psychologically, your psyche, your psychology has to be intact. And for that to happen, like you need to heal all those traumas. And then of course gets into interesting stuff like ancestral healing, and that's a whole nother topic. But yeah, that's kind of some of how I look at that.
I'm curious if you would share some of the like either sessions you've done or like what modalities.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting too, right? Because you were bringing up a point too where it's really all connected. There's many ways to skin a cat. All roads lead to Rome. You can get at things from different angles. So I've noticed in myself, for example, the body is deeply connected to the traumas, right? So it's like you can actually, through things like yoga, right? Things like stretching, things like breath work, things like meditation, you can actually find stored traumas in your body and release them. But that's a relatively recent discovery for me, as I've sort of tried to deal with very intense body pain that I've had, back and hips and things like that. There's that, and then there's the inner child work has been wild, right? So working with somebody, and these have all been locals in the valley. There's people like you've interviewed Teshna, I know, for the channel. I think I interviewed her years ago as well. She does interesting work where you're releasing sort of patterns out of the body, out of the psyche, right? But she does it physically through the body, which is really interesting. But yeah, stuff where you're going into your psyche and you're sort of opening up the hologram and like looking at it, right? Like looking at the whys and the hows and the whats and what that made you feel and what it brings up for you now in the current situation. Because like, I'm sitting here next to my wife, like there's no better reflection of you than your wounds than someone you live with, right? Who you make, you probably care about and you have feelings for and all those kinds of things, right? So we, her and I do this dance all the time where, we'll piss each other off, right? And our sort of stuff will come out, and then you get to look at it, right? Then you get to analyze like, oh, okay, this happened and that connected me to this part of my psyche or this thing that happened in my life, which made me feel like I'll just give a silly example that somebody that Mira actually who has not been on channel, will be on the channel. On all these people are part of the health retreat as well, by the way, but helped me uncover, which was I always had this thing about the women in my life maintaining a certain level of order and sort of like cleanliness and order, and like I needed things to kind of make sense and be a certain way. And I'm going through this with Mira, and we're like, we're talking, we're going back and forth, and we're looking at it. And I came to the discovery that like what I had going on with my mom as a kid, that was like the one thing she gave me in all the like madness of my life at that age, and how I associated. I don't want to get into like the super personal stuff, but like how that was for me as a child with my mom. That was the one thing she gave me, was that everything was clean and ordered in the house. She knew where everything was. It all made sense to me. And this was like my connection in my little 4-year-old brain of like 4, 8, 10, 12, right? Of having sanity, of having like a connection to it's okay. Things are okay. So here I am in a full grown adult, walking into a house where there's chaos and freaking the fuck out, right? Mentally, it's like, right? And having no idea why. But
Hello, you have 3 kids.
Right, exactly. It doesn't make any sense, right? But now I understand, why, like why that is. And then, there's techniques to deal with some of that stuff. But
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing. I from my trauma experience, I love to share because a lot of things shift with me after I did this whole work. That it got into the point that I look at myself in the mirror, I'm like, who is this person? Like I couldn't recognize myself after doing the work that I was doing, and I did not know that something was changing on me till like some time happened by, and I'm like, huh. Before, when I used to have like this trauma of not being feeling good enough with myself, like I was being judged when I was very little by my own family about my skin color, about my kind of body and stuff like that. So I would never felt safe with my own body. So I used to put a lot of makeup on in my normal life. That like I could not leave the house without makeup. So it was a big problem, and all of a sudden after doing some work, and I did not notice, but I used to stop wearing makeup at all, and I didn't notice for a long time. Like, oh, I don't use makeup anymore. Why? Like, and it's because the work I was doing, it was about giving myself love. Like my lack of self-love was not loving myself and like stuff like that. So the reflection is after a while, like, oh, actually, I like myself. Like, I like my body. Like, there's there is nothing wrong with me. Like, so it is like the result of like my therapy and my trauma connected with not feeling good enough with myself. So, yeah,
it's a beautiful story. And I feel so many people could relate to that, myself included. We try to hide parts of ourselves that we're shameful of, and a lot of it comes back to childhood. Whether your parents or your sibling or schoolmates, sometimes they don't even mean to hurt you, but you got hurt and scared as a child and you weren't able to process that emotion. And especially if you don't tell a loved one or a safe person, like often a mom or dad or whomever, even if it was something so silly of getting teased on the playground because, you were ugly or whatever, which all kids get teased in that way. If a child doesn't process it like that, that shit carries over, and it can carry over for decades. And you don't realize that's why I wear so much makeup, because I don't want anyone for 1 second to see that I have an imperfect pimple or blemish, or the eyebrows aren't, perfectly stenciled in or something, because that somehow creates you being unsafe and feeling attacked.
Yeah.
And even something you were saying, Jesse, it's like when you walk into the house and you see a mess, because there's 3 children and you half run a business out of your house too. Like you got people traipsing through all the time. And there's must be something associated with that of like, wait a minute, there's not going to be love in this house. Like if your mom equated a loving, if her best version of herself was like the order and neatness, because there's a lot of other stuff happening, when that's not there, it's like, wait, now my house isn't safe.
That's right.
I think it always comes back to safety.
It always comes back to safety.
Yeah.
That's right.
And it is absolutely ridiculous because, as you said, in a whatever 40-year-old adult, like, this is fine. You don't care that there's dishes. Like, you don't care that the bath towels are on the floor. But something gets triggered as unsafe. And then often, how it comes out for me at least, I lash out at whomever I'm living with.
Yeah, yeah.
And it might be a husband, it might be the stepkids, it might be whatever. And it's not that big of a deal. And that's some of the things I'm just relating to both of your stories that I unpacked. And it's almost like, it's not that I'm shameful, because that'd be the opposite effect of what therapy is supposed to do, but I'm more sheepish. It's like a little like, oh, right. Now I understand this isn't actually about the kids doing the thing. It's more with me and my anxiety that comes up, that I'm out of control and that I'm not safe. And that's the type of thing that therapists, deep journey, medicine work, whatever it might be, I think helps unpack that. And I'll mention one specific type of therapy, which is what I did a year ago. And I actually wasn't familiar with it. Some people had mentioned the name previously, but I didn't know much about it. And it's called EMDR therapy. And I'm struggling to remember exactly what it stands for, but I think it's eye movement, something reprocessing disassociation or I'll put the right comments in there of what the name is. But it says eye movement, and it actually had to do with tones and sounds in my ear. And long story short is a fairly traditional therapy session of an hour of talking, the threads being pulled by a very skillful person. As I'm talking about, a divorce, and I think that's the problem, that's the trauma. And all of a sudden, something comes back from third grade. It's like, what is this? She goes so deep into that third grade memory and experience, and then reprocesses using tones in the ears. You can also do it with light, but I think the light, you have to be in person. And this was over Zoom in this modern era that we're in. I had my little headphones in so I could hear the right and left tones. And this is obviously the very layperson's explanation and also my personal experience. Something worked and I don't know what it was. There's a possibility that I've just matured, in a spiritual way, past a lot of these traumas and triggers. But I really think something about this reprocessing of why I wasn't safe for that exact instance in third grade and how that was related to something in a divorce.
Beautiful.
It was mind-blowing for me. Absolutely mind-blowing. And it was a silly thing, and I'll just say it. It was the equivalent. It had to do with like elves and like these little fairies in the forest that I didn't know weren't real. And someone told me they weren't real. It's like worse than Santa Claus, basically.
I mean, they are real.
Okay, well now I know they're really real. But when you grow up kind of more in the Matrix and that, they weren't real. And I was so ashamed. I was so embarrassed. I was horrified that they weren't real. And all the kids were around when someone's parent accidentally let me know that the little gift that I got, the scarf from the elf, wasn't actually an elf. Oh my God. Apparently that's is traumatic. And I hid it. I ran to the back of the gymnastics class and just cried behind the mats and never told anybody about it. And I'm just sharing an actual example. The shame of being found out and the shame of being humiliated because I was believing something is so much tied to like unhealthy adult patterns in my own brain of feeling like this perfectionism that I can't be a fool and I can't be made to look like I was stupid especially in front of people. Yeah. So I think a lot of folks can relate to that type of example, but there's just, that particular therapy is really helpful for childhood stuff.
No, and it's like if I were, I think I can relate to that a lot. And it's like we kind of construct our lives around protecting our self-identity, right? Like protecting.
No, what do you mean?
Yeah, like protecting our ego so that whatever that thing we think of ourselves as doesn't get hurt, like isn't vulnerable, isn't, in a position where it can get damaged and hurt. But like ultimately that leads to misery. Yeah. Like you can't be authentic. You can't do that and be authentic. You can't do that and be happy truly. Like you can think you're happy. Like you can do fun stuff. In my case, you can be into sports and hang out with your friends and drink and go play golf and go to the beach. And, you can do stuff that brings you enjoyment. But inside, unless you're going to heal all that stuff, you're hiding. Like you're walking through the world protecting this self that doesn't exist.
Playing small
for sure. That's huge. Yeah. And it's like, it's kind of, I don't know if I suck at metaphors, but it's like sort of if there's something here that's attached to the strings, and the thing up there that controls the strings controls the thing here, there are specific traumas that are holding the strings, that are
Totally.
controlling the behavior. And so for me, right, it's like, it's been years and years of like not understanding why I feel like X, or why I'm reacting like X, and needing to understand that, right? Like needing to understand and have those answers. And those are the answers. Like the answers are in the traumas. Like they're in the thing, because your psychology, like your psyche, the things that, you know, when that happened to you as a little girl, like you got embarrassed and you cried and you felt shame and you felt whatever you felt, that goes deep into your psyche. It gets stored in the body as well, and then it creates your mental programs, like literally. So then most of us spend our whole lives just playing out mental programs, which is like, I think that's kind of samsara. I think that's sort of like how, you know, that's why we come back over and over and over and over and over again, because, you know, we're not willing to go through the very scary process. Like it's terrifying.
Yeah.
Of, you know, of sort of taking yourself on and trying to understand yourself and working through a lot of stuff that you didn't think existed. I mean, I remember the first time hearing about trauma. I think that's like if you get raped, or, you know, you're in a war, or, you know, you get kidnapped and stuck in a dungeon for, you know, like that's trauma.
Mm-hmm.
Especially as a man, it's almost embarrassing to talk about trauma in the context of like, somebody was mean to me, you know, like, or like
when I was
in
third grade,
right? When I was right, but that's how it works. Like that's how it works. Our experiences shape, you know, all of those things, which shape our programs, which then shape our reality and how we feel. And if we want to change that, you got to get in. Like you got to get into the muck and deal with it.
I think no matter what, you're gonna have trauma. In my experience, like I had grown the opposite way that you did. The opposite. So when you share with me your life, and like how I see your parents loving you and all this stuff, I mean, like,
so you had opposite childhoods,
yes,
opposite
and
growing
like,
up.
and trauma. Like he has trauma, and I have trauma. I'm like, what's going on? There is no way that there is not trauma at all, because you are here trying to like deal whatever you sign up to deal with. So the situation is gonna come up with the agreements that you decide to do. So no, that's for me big, seeing how he grew up and how I grew up, completely different. The opposite, trauma. There's no way. So, yeah.
I don't think there's any person, what you just said, who on this planet, and maybe I could be wrong, I don't think there's a single person on this planet that doesn't experience trauma at least some point in their life, and probably many, many, many points in their life. And I really get what you're saying, Jesse. I thought PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, was only for veterans of war.
Right,
I thought, who am I? I work in New York City in the fashion industry. Like, this is not PTSD material. Like, are you joking? This is
certainly can be.
well, then so where I'm going with this is, I do think, and this is, someone can do the research and study, but I sense every person on this planet has some sort of PTSD because they haven't processed through trauma. It's one thing if you go through trauma and you have a healthy way of being held by community, by loved ones, maybe a therapist, you know, healthy, and it's okay. It doesn't mean bad things can't happen in this life. It's just, how do you emotionally process it and make peace so that you can go on towards that higher version of yourself. And so anyone who's watching this video, I sense like you kind of feel this, but myself 10, 15 years ago, I wouldn't have believed it. I could have had that. And I just want to like offer that permission, you know, or inspiration for anyone thinks like, oh, who am I to have trauma? I had a privileged life. I grew up with rich parents. I had a sports car. I have a great house now and whatever. No, you can absolutely have trauma. And the sooner that you recognize it and you kind of dig into it, just the more one at peace and like happy and more in flow and more synchronicities, your whole life is going to get better. And like you both were saying, the only way is through. There is no spiritual bypassing trauma. There is no like, oh, well, I'm spiritual and I do yoga and I'm totally fine. You still have to figure out what is your stuff, and wherever you're stuck is that's the most packed information right there. Wherever you're the most triggered by people, stuck in life, man, go deep. Start threading those things apart, because the messages to ourselves are in these traumas that we have, and how we unpack them is, I think, one of the biggest reasons that we're here.
Yeah.
And the Buddhist philosophy, all of life is suffering in a way. Yeah, sure. We've talked about this before. And I think it's like all of life is the suffering and lessons that it's giving us, an opportunity. The same shit will come up again and again. We'll get tested the same ways. And it's like, how are you going to handle it this time? More skillfully, with less trauma and more mindfulness than 2 years ago and 6 years ago. Otherwise, you keep getting confronted with the same situations over and over. And I think processing trauma helps you step into things. And the last little point on all of this, it's like my EMDR therapist, who I went to a year ago, she was sharing the statistic with me that the number one reason behind everybody who has stage fright, which is over half the people out there have some kind of stage fright, is childhood trauma.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize that. I thought, oh, it's just because you're shy, right? Or you don't think you're good enough for this topic. It all threads back to childhood trauma. And I'll just round out my own personal example saying, I have had extraordinary stage fright my entire career, even though I'm an excellent, eloquent professional in group meetings, in the office, leading teams. You put me on a stage, and even the first interview I did with you, Jesse, I was like, I hate this. I hate this. I hate this. I'm sweating. My entire back is just sweating. It's you and me and an iPhone. And it's like, well, there's not even anyone here to judge us. And we can edit it. And we can edit this stuff too. And I'm just sweating. And it's not as bad as it would have been. I would have said no otherwise. So playing small, I've definitely had moments in my career where I have passed on public speaking events because I don't want to deal with it. Yeah. It was too much. And I fluffed it off. I'm like, I'm successful doing my other things. I don't need to. Like, I'm fine. Someone else can handle it. My business partner, trust me, he wants the mic. Like, put him on stage. I probably missed so much beautiful opportunity if I had worked through that better. And the EMDR therapy helped me. And I was like, sure, I'll be on your YouTube podcast. And now I don't even sweat anymore when we do these things. And now I'm like, this is really fun. And you two helped that a lot. So.
No, yeah, so it's not an easy job at all to face yourself. So, no, I mean, for me, like, I did my last work of trauma I did like a month ago. I did quantum medicine. Quantum.
Oh, interesting.
So, and I was sharing with the person, like, laughing, like, oh, this happened to me when I was a kid, and I was like, because it's silly, no? And then I give him all the stuff, and then he makes me, it's like a time travel dimension, what you're doing in this moment. Because you travel and see yourself when this happened, and you're like feeling and trying to deal with the emotion that you didn't deal then. So all of a sudden, with before I was giggling about it, they bully me, like. And after I just crying. I was like, why am I in my head? Like, why am I crying? I just couldn't stop crying. Like, I just, okay, all right, let's cry. Like, it was painful for me to like go through all this, and I did not know that it was gonna be that painful. So I was like, oh. So now I'm waiting to do my second one. I'm like, I'm gonna wait a little more because like it's painful.
Can you describe, it sounds like you described your experience totally. Yeah. I'm like so curious. Quantum medicine, I haven't heard of that particular, I don't know exactly what you're talking about. And that could mean many things. So how would you describe quantum medicine?
So once I share my experience with this person, he'll make me do some exercises with my body, like tapping myself in certain periods of times, certain breathing. Once I was there and I was just crying, I couldn't stop. All right, we're gonna do this now. Like, so after a while, like, oh, I felt really good. And so we did the exercise again with the same experience, and I did not cry as much. I might like just one tear or two, and then at the third time, okay, we're gonna do one more. All right, no, I didn't cry this time. So like, that's how I noticed I released it. And in my daily life, I kind of like in the last couple of months, I've been noticing like when I usually, and I still have a lot of things to work, of course, but when I in my I find myself in situations where before I would be like pissed, or like I would like answer back. I'm like, oh, okay. And it just feels much better. And the result is much better. So instead of like getting, if someone is trying to like get me into something, oh, someone has like this
A
heat,
hook, a hook.
and like
Yeah.
and wants to give it to someone else, so it find you. And like if you like just do not engage to it,
It's like the dark energies looking for someone
yeah, exactly.
to latch
And
onto.
I noticed that, wow, oh my god, I did not react to this. I just let it, the person feel whatever it needs to feel, and like, and we're all good. I would have like in my head, I can tell this. No, I'm not just gonna say anything. No, I think this is not mine. So it was great. Of course, it was like an answer of like work that I have done, because in the past I would have like run my mouth and engage and like do the whole thing and create a bad relationship. Which, like, for example, with this person, like nothing. Like after a while, like, it was all on this person, and we were all good. I see her, hey, and like everything is good, and she feels good as well. So it's amazing, beautiful.
It's a great point about what I call stacking. It's like, and sometimes we don't have control over what comes to us first. Like your first therapist came to you, mine came to me. And over the years, it's like literally the years go on. We just start stacking and stacking. We're a different person each time we hit it. And, you know, I like to think things are moving in the right direction in my kind of like journey. Either that is just like one big freaking circle, like a zigzag map everywhere, but it's awesome. And I think in my older years now, nothing great comes of getting super pissed at people. Like, it just is this like
Ever.
Is this like the wisdom of it just? And man, I am very good at getting very pissed. Like I am. Oh, I'm good at it. Like at an internal level, I can act on it. Like I had an old business partner that said to me, he's like, yeah, when you're pissed, like the whole city feels it. Like we know. And he's like, and you're usually silent about it. And like every person's like, oh, just shrinking. The power that gives you, the power, the thing. And it always ends up more toxic and a worse outcome the more angry that you get. And I don't think it's wrong to have an angry emotion, but how we process it and not spread that, like some darkness is coming over me that I'm so angry, probably more about myself than I am whatever's going on in the situation, needing to blame other people and put it out there on them. And it's like, you just inspired me, Ida. It's like the more we can just like sit with it and be calm and not be triggered, the more deconditioning of the childhood trauma patterns that we've done through the various work on ourselves, it actually makes the world a better place.
Oh, yeah.
The less pissiness you put out there. Everything benefits from that.
But, you know, stifling it doesn't work either. So it's like you actually have to get at the root and release it. Otherwise, sometimes I think it might be better to scream at someone than to keep that, you know, in you. Like
possibly.
Hopefully later you realize, holy crap, that was just my, you know, my wounds. But I just wanted to touch on something quickly. So like, and it's funny coming to terms with what trauma means, you know, in the context of, because it could also be that you're starving to death, or that people and, you know, your family members were killed, or, you know, horrific, tragic events. But it can also be that gnomes aren't real and your classmates are laughing at you, like, for real, right? Like that kind of stuff.
They're actually gnomes. How did you know that? That's I said fairies and elves, and not everyone's down with okay, they're actually gnomes. So my family will understand. Continue. Sorry.
No. So, so, you know, it's interesting, right? Because I think there's probably a culture here and there that exists still on the planet where trauma is probably pretty minimal. And when you see scientific studies of those cultures, you know, they tend to be sort of semi-untouched, kind of indigenous type, you know, type cultures. They don't have mental health issues, right? They don't have crime. They don't have violence, essentially. No one's getting raped. They're not stealing from each other. You kind of have these, you know, you have environments that exist where the culture, the society is still healthy. And then that doesn't cause, you know, not that there couldn't ever be a trauma, because a bear could come in and eat someone, or you know, a baby could be left screaming all night, and, you know, what, there can still be some amount of stuff that happens. But really, the issue is that a issue in this conversation is our society is so distorted that that's why everyone has trauma, right? Like school is traumatic, period. Like you can't go through school, as we call school, like what we call current education, and not come out of, like, work is traumatic, the money system is traumatic, like scarcity is traumatic. um you know, growing up in a house without both parents who love each other and are in a wonderful, kind, loving relationship, that's traumatic. That's like most at this point, right? Like divorce is what, it's 60% or something in the US at this point. Single, in certain communities, single mothers are 80% and things like, I mean, so we're, you know, you can't, the violence is rampant. This is we're living in a society, in a culture that's, humans have become so disconnected from themselves that, yeah, like you have to spend your 20s or 30s or 40s or 50s or later, like getting back to yourself, like real, you know, undoing, if you can, you know, undoing all of those traumatic experiences, because you grow up in a sort of unsafe world, right? And that's, you know, I think that's a big piece of it, is as to why everybody experiences this. And then I just want to touch on again, like, there are solutions, and that's what's, you know, that's to me what's so cool, is that, you know, if you're having depression, or you're having sadness, or you're having anger, or you're having patterns that are repeating in your life, or you're having whatever it is, there's a psychological reason. Like there's a piece of you that is damaged, that's recreating or creating those experiences over and over again. And it might not be easy to deal with all of that, but there are actual solutions, which is amazing, because then we can, you know, we don't have to off ourselves and you know, live right. We actually can solve that, at least to some degree.
Yeah. I was talking with a friend, and he made this comment, and I'm picking up kind of about your comment, and I just mean this in the most like sincere and meaningful way, not sarcastic. And he said to me, and this is a very intelligent ex-special forces military, like 60 something years old, still working in his career on the scientific cutting edge of mental health and healing using frequency technology in the US, like awesome stuff. And we were talking about ourselves. Like he wasn't saying, oh, theoretically for those people out there. He said, I don't think there's a single person out there that hasn't considered taking their own life at some point in their time. Depending how serious they would actually do that, or would they ever take an action, one step towards it, but they haven't had that thought. And we were having this conversation about, it's because there are so many difficult and traumatic things that happen to us. And if, especially people who don't have the support system, they don't have other friends that are talking about these kind of things. Maybe there's a family that totally shames and dismisses and brushes under the carpet any type of abuse and trauma that's happened. Man, it is so hard for someone to be alone, feeling alone, that I want everyone to know, like, you're not alone. Everybody is having these kind of struggles to whatever degree is their own reality. And that's what's crazy too. It's like, we're all in our own reality. We all have different scenarios, environments, people in our lives, and everyone's doing the best that they can in some way. And just know that, like, you're not alone, and finding community is super important. And we have that in Vilcabamba. And it feels good to be able to offer this kind of conversation, you know, out to other people. And a lot of our commenters on the videos said, you know, you guys are voicing a lot of things that I have in my own head. So just know, like, we're all in this together in some kind of quantum, spiritually connected way.
Beautiful. That you brought up to me, like a thought that it made me forgive myself and forgive others, is that we are all doing the best we can at the level of consciousness that we are. So that let me forgive any person that I felt like somebody did to me. Like, he couldn't do better. Same as me, I couldn't not do better last year. Like that level of empathy and understanding for the other person. So no, yeah. Thank you for reminding me that.
Yeah. Here we are doing the best that we can.
We do progress every day, I believe.
Coming from three people, I will authentically say, like, good friends of mine, knowing you guys, like, for the past year that I've known both of you, and I date a bit like more closely longer, Jesse, in the more recent months, working together and collaborating on awesome stuff like this. We're walking the walk. We're all trying, and it's not none of the three of us, not one of us has like an easy path, an easy life where, oh yeah, not stressed, not overwhelmed, not dealing with stuff. And it's like, but we're making the best, and we continue to grow ourselves and how we show up to deal with the stuff. It's not about, oh, find a version of life where there is no stress. There's always going to be stressors in life. It's how do we show up and how do we deal with them. And like we're unpacking our stuff.
Yeah.
And it's good to have like your peeps around when you do it.
yeah, and also like not try to rush yourself in your growing. Like you don't have to be perfect. Like you have a whole lifetime to like work things out. So that's something I always try to remember for me to like like I feel like I'm doing good. It doesn't matter. I still do mistakes, but I'm doing good. I'm better than yesterday, and that's good enough. So it doesn't matter that there is pressure. Like no, I'm doing the work that I need to do in my own timing. You know what? I'm grateful that I got to learn this about myself at 27 years old, rather than doing at 50 years old. So whatever is the time that you have the opportunity to work on yourself and take it. Take it and do the work.
Yeah.
And for me, it's like something that I always share this with Jesse is like, if I cannot accomplish all the things I need to do in this lifetime, I have the idea that I will continue doing in another lifetime, which I'm happy to do. I'm like I made peace. Like I'll die and I'll come back and like hopefully I'll continue where I left. I don't have to do this thing again. So no, it's
we'll all meet each other again.
My way to look at it to feel good. No.
I wonder if that's our kickoff for our next podcast. We never even got past this first topic. I was like, you guys, this isn't a whole podcast, childhood trauma. Like, we need other things to talk about. Well, lo and behold,
Go for another hour.
This is we can keep going. But soul family,
Totally.
Feeling like coming back. What is this like? Whether it's a literal like reincarnation by some sort of like religious or spiritual definition, or just the essence of like, God, we've done this before. When you find your people, right? And it's different than the biological family often, and sometimes it's the same. And yeah, I have that feeling. We'll be back here doing a podcast in 3 lifetimes from now. Different. We'll sit in different seats though. We're gonna totally sit in different seats. Yeah.
And different characters, different roles.
Oh, totally different characters.
Yeah, I was watching this TV show, and many people have said things like this, but the guy was a sort of like a lord, like a duke or something, was explaining to a regular guy who was part of the family he was trying to bring into this role, and the guy didn't like all of the service, the butlers and the maids and the this and that, and the guy explained to him, the guy who didn't want the service was like, hey, I don't really need this, could we let this guy go, basically. And the higher up was saying, we all have a role to play. Right? And if you don't let him play his role, you're doing him a disservice, right? So playing your role well, like whatever that is so interesting, because they all come with their pros and cons. Like, material wealth can be a miserable experience, right? Because of all the responsibility and all the stuff that comes with it. Just like, and it can also be a beautiful experience. It's not the role that defines that. Just like, they've done studies where in some ways, in some places, like poverty can be an indicator of happiness in certain ways, in certain places.
Less things to detach.
Yeah, right. And maybe be more of a focus on the family unit and on, the things that kind of matter. But you brought up, sort of self-love and self-talk. Gosh, the importance of that is massive, right? Because I think we all have some amount of negative mental programs that are kind of like the voice in our head. And it can be a challenge to take that on, but to give yourself the positive self-talk and the self-love that you need, that maybe you didn't get the way you wanted to at this age and that age and this stage and that stage and all those kinds of things, matters, because we are down here sort of feeling disconnected in some way. Like we don't have that direct, visceral, visual, sensory connection to God's source on earth all the time. Like you have to sort of find it and cultivate it and figure out where you can pull strands in and get pieces. But so it's like it can feel like, yeah, that's scary, right? That's that's scary. So, yeah.
The unnerving of feeling untethered often to source, right? And that's when the question comes into like, so wait, what is this all about? Like, why am I working so hard? Like, why am I in this path? And yeah, I don't know if we want to go into it, but I think so much is the practices that we can do in our day-to-day life. Like, what are the rituals, the routines, and the practices that meaningful to me are different than what's meaningful to you and to you, that I can have the discipline to show up and do, because it does take discipline. Yeah. I love doing yoga. I love teaching yoga. Man, does it take a discipline to show up and actually do it. If y'all aren't coming to my class, there's some days where I wouldn't do it. I'm just too busy. I'm not in the mood. I'm like, whatever. But to know, and I think this kind of, I call it a scaffolding, how you hold yourself up in life with these practices, routines, and rituals that keep us connected to source, or calm down the anxiety, or remember that it's all just a journey, that everything's perfect how we are right now. I'm better today than I was yesterday, and that's all that matters. I can sleep easy at night. If we're just rushing, going, I'm speaking mostly to myself 10 plus years ago, and you don't have any space for these practices, it leads to an early death, like quite frankly, from a heart attack and high blood pressure and just unhappiness. Like this is where the depression
body breaks down. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. The chronic pain, then the surgery because you can't heal from the certain stuff in your body that is stress stuck in certain areas. So I think any of these practices are so important. Either we can talk about them or save it for another episode. Like, what are our personal practices? Because people are curious. They want to know, like, well, what does work for you? Maybe I'll read that book or I'll get into it.
Yeah, my memory is so bad with those things. I wish I had a list of all the things. I was thinking earlier of Byron Katie, who is amazing. But yeah, I don't know. We probably don't want to get in all that. We have little kids at home that we need to go be present.
They're making messes, so you better go check on the mess that's there.
Well, luckily the nanny is with them, so the mess is minimal at the moment, so I can stay calm when I get home. But
all right, to be continued.
I could spend the whole day if I'm at home with them cleaning up, just constantly. So what I do is I clean up and I take them out.
So the little ones are 2 and 4, right? And 4. So that's you just be right after them the whole time. Yeah. Well, drop in the comments, guys. Like, there's so many topics we could talk about. It's like, what are the practices, soul family, coming back in the next lifetime where I refuse to repeat these same karmas, so I better learn the lesson. Let us know what you want to hear about, and we'll answer questions and we'll talk about it, because we could do this for hours. I'm not kidding. Like we this is what we do when we're not on rolling camera. So it's fun to do it while the camera's on.
Most of the time we're like, why we're not recording this? We have very good content most of the time.
So good.
Guys, well, thank you so much for tuning in. We are losing Chiyoko for a short period of time as she visits family back in the States. So have a great trip. We will miss you. We will start to incorporate some broader conversations with some other members of the community here at some point, so you can look forward to that. Probably the first 15 or 20 will be people involved in our health retreat. So that's really exciting, really high level souls, really high level people who have some amazing modalities and experience to share. So we'll continue to dive deep on some of that. And we'll continue to try and bring you as much good content as we can. Again, please keep the comments coming. Anything you'd like to see us cover or do, we'd love to hear from you. Otherwise, have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank
Ciao.
You.